Most people put their money in banks without really understanding what the banks do with it. In the next 5 minutes, you will learn things that will increase your understanding of banks in ways you've never been taught before. Did you know that banks once got bailed out because they couldn't pay back money that they borrowed? But who are bankers borrowing money from in the first place anyways? Well, banks are allowed to use people's deposits. They usually use this money to hand out loans and make other investments. This is also how credit cards are possible. Did you know that when you pay with a credit card, you're borrowing money from this pile? Don't worry, they also have a separate pile called a reserve for when customers want to withdraw or spend their money. Some countries do enforce a minimum amount of money that the banks have to keep in reserve, but in the US, banks have no limit on how much money they can use. And believe me, banks are not shy about using your money. In 2008, Bank of America lost over $45 billion of those dollars. No. You didn't hear me right. You see, they grabbed a ton of money from everyone's savings and checkings account and gave them to a ton of people, and they bought houses with this money. Some refused to pay it back. Others simply were never in a position to pay back the money that they borrowed in the first place. And Bank of America was just one of many banks that did this. And you're probably wondering, why did so many of Bank of America's investments fail in 2008? Well, let's just say that there was a significant relaxation of lending standards during the housing boom. And this is what led up to the 2008 financial crisis. And just like that, the hard-earned dollars of millions of Americans were gone. Some of these banks went bankrupt. Other banks, like Bank of America, were bailed out. This means that the government gave them money to pay back some of what they lost. But why are banks even allowed to use this much money? Could it simply be because banks heavily influence these regulations? It's estimated that the banking industry spends billions of dollars on lobbying. So I guess for a couple million, you too can somehow off with people's money. But why did the government choose to help these bankers out? What would have happened if the banks didn't get bailed out? One hypothesis is that if banks didn't get bailed out, then services like ATMs and debit cards would work less often as a strategy by the banks to delay running out of money. Just imagine going to the ATM and every other withdrawal or debit card payment fails. I would start to lose trust in the bank's ability to dispense my money. Wouldn't you? History shows that when people lose trust in a financial institution like banks, they typically withdraw their money and close their accounts. Don't forget that banks don't usually have everyone's money in reserve, so the whole system fails if too many people withdraw too quickly. The bank can run out of money, making millions of people poor instantly. Something similar happened even before the 2008 financial crisis, but back then, the government didn't intervene in the same way. We called it the Great Depression. And to avoid a similar fate, the government saved some banks from running out of money. But they couldn't just give them taxpayer money, because it's the responsible taxpayers whose money was lost in the first place. Remember, the bank was mostly using regular people's money to give out loans, and the solution was creating money out of thin air. This worsens inflation and it tends to weaken economies. Interestingly, some of these banks are still working financial institutions today. Bank of America was reckless with American citizens' money, was bailed out by the US government, and faced little to no punishment. They've continued operating despite actions that should have led to failure. They were deemed too big to fail. I believe that we should have actually punished individuals for failing their duty to run a trusted bank. You see, it's not uncommon for major banks to have hundreds or even thousands of employees that make well over $1 million a year. So why didn't our money come out of their pockets? A la Alex Jones style, and like a deadbeat dad who fails to make a child support payment, bankers should have been imprisoned for failing to liquidate their assets to pay back their customers. Assets like stocks, cars, properties. But the majority of bankers were let off with a slap on the wrist. So what's changed after the 2008 recession? You'll be relieved to know it is more difficult to get a loan for a house. So now you might be wondering what's even the point of having a savings account? If you think about it, for most people, the only benefit of a savings account is convenience. The convenience of having access to your money in multiple locations so that you don't have to carry too much cash. Banks are also useful if you need a loan. For the majority of people, loans are only really useful for getting a house or a car. And unfortunately, a lot of people usually end up with high amounts of credit card debt, or even worse, student loans. This indicates the prevalence of lending to individuals who may struggle to repay their debt. But nothing is perfect. And if you're considering cutting off banks from your life completely, think again, considering that all it would take is a house fire to lose all of your life savings. And the last thing you need to know about loans is that banks always expect to make a small profit through interest. They also make money off of late credit card payments and other fees. And if there's anything to take from this video, is to pick your debt wisely. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
When they call, I tell them I can't pay it back yet. Credit card debt. Tomorrow I may buy myself a dining room set or this Boba Fett.